We are on Daf Memches Amud Aleph at the Mishnah at the very top. Shalosh Asheros Hein. There are three types of trees that can become forbidden because of Avodah Zarah, which we call an Asherah tree. So the Mishnah is going to list for us three different ways or three different types of Asherah tree. Number one, Ilan Shenato Mitzchila L'Shem Avodas Kochavim Harezu Asura. Standard is that you planted an acorn for the purposes of Avodah Zarah and it grows into a tree. There can't be a more basic form of Asherah than that. That's the standard Asherah tree. Now we get to number two. Gida'o upisalo l'shem avodas kochavim v'hechlif notel mashehechlif. Let's say you have a tree that was planted innocently, and after 10 years of growth, a person decides that he's going to either cut off a major branch of the tree or cut off the tree in the middle of the trunk, and he says that this cutting is a designation that whatever grows afterwards shall be for Avodah Zarah. So that too will designate the new aftergrowth as Avodah Zarah, and if you want to kasher the tree, so to speak, to make it permissible once again, you have to cut off all of the new aftergrowth. That's category number two. Now I want to clarify something very important, and that is, I want you to recall a machlokas that we saw a few days ago between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. What was the machlokas? Can a person make a tree into an Asherah tree if it wasn't planted for that purpose? Do you remember that machlokas? Okay, good. Now, according to the Chachamim, you cannot make a tree an Asherah tree if it wasn't planted for that purpose. You can't go over to a tree and start worshiping it, and now the tree becomes forbidden. But according to Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, you can. Now, if you recall, the Gemara had said that Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda's proof to this is what? The Torah says, in one place it says, Va'asherehem tisrafun ba'esh, completely incinerate an Asherah tree, which means every component of it. And then there's another pasuk that says, Va'asherehem tigadeun. What does the word tigadeun mean? It means to cut it to a stump. Now, if an Asherah tree is completely forbidden, why then is cutting it to a stump sufficient? You're still left with a stump for Avodah Zarah. So Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda concluded that that pasuk is talking about a tree that was not planted for Avodah Zarah, but at later point it was worshipped when it was just a sapling, so all of the thing that grows above that point when it was first growing becomes usher for Avodah Zarah. Now, okay, does that ring a bell at all? Now, if that's the case, if we take a look at our Mishnah, this case that we've just seen just now, let's consider. What we're suggesting is, in the second case of Asherah, that even though you didn't plant it for Avodah Zarah, it's still possible for the aftergrowth to become Avodah Zarah. Who does that sound like? Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. However, think about the opposite alternative. Maybe this is going even according to the Chachamim, because remember, in the discussion previously, we weren't talking about cutting down anything. We weren't talking about lopping off a branch or cutting down the trunk. We were just saying that while the tree is going, a person bows down to the tree. But what happens if you actually do a maisa to the tree, such that you alter it for the purposes of Avodah Zarah by cutting off a branch or cutting it down at the trunk? Is it possible that even the Chachamim might agree that in such an instance it is subject to Avodah Zarah? So there's ambiguity here, and I want us to think about that because that's going to be the subject of the Gemara today. Next, third case of Asherah is Hamitachteha avodas kochavim v'natla hareze muteres. That when you place an idol underneath a tree, that tree becomes an Asherah tree. That's the third category of Asherah. And therefore, if you want to make the tree permissible once again, just pull the statue away, and the tree no longer is an Asherah tree. So, just to review, we have our three Asherah categories. One is where you planted the acorn for the purpose of idolatry. That's a full-blown Asherah tree. Category number two is when the tree was planted normally, and then someone went ahead and cut off a branch or the trunk for the purpose of the aftergrowth being avodah zarah. That's also an asherah. And category number 3 is when you put an idol underneath a tree, that designates the tree as an asherah.
Is it in the category number 2, when they cut that branch off, the branch itself becomes the...
no, the branch is being discarded.
It's discarded, but now the tree has...
What you're designating is that the aftergrowth, what grows in the place of that lopped off branch, shall now be for avodah zarah.
And who makes that designation?
The person cutting off the branch. The person cutting off the branch says, I am cutting off this branch so that whatever grows in its stead shall be for avodah zarah.
What if the idol worshiper doesn't do anything, but he just designates the tree?
So we're not going to deal with what ifs right now, because I want us to focus specifically on these cases. And when you see the Gemara, I think you'll see some permutations, and we'll get into that shortly. Let's take a look now at the Gemara. Amri devei Rabbi Yanai, v'hu shehivrich v'hirkif begufo shel ilan. So Rabbi Yanai teaches that the only time that the aftergrowth of a tree that was not planted for Asherah can become forbidden is if, what do? You either take a branch from the portion that was lopped off, that is now growing anew, and you replant it into the ground, or you take a branch from somewhere else and you graft it onto the stump that you want to regenerate. But if you don't do that, but you just cut off a branch without doing any other action, so then the aftergrowth does not become avodah zarah. This is a huge chiddush, and it doesn't really align with our Mishnah. And that's really the Gemara's next question is, V'ha'anan gida o u'islotanan. But our Mishnah doesn't say that. Our Mishnah says that all you need to do is cut off a branch or a trunk, and then whatever grows afterwards de facto becomes avodah zarah. Ela ki itmar the Rabbi Yanai le'inyan bittul itmar, da'af al gav dehivrich v'hirkif begufo shel ilan, ki notal ma shehechlif shapir dami. So you're right. We didn't understand Rabbi Yanai. He wasn't talking about what prohibits the aftergrowth, but what he was saying is that when, you remember, what did we say? That when you cut off a branch, the new aftergrowth becomes avodah zarah, and if you want to restore the tree to its permissibility, just cut off the new growth. The chiddush of Rabbi Yanai is that that's even true when the aftergrowth was replanted into the ground, or in a situation where you grafted a branch onto the stump and caused it to grow. All you need to do is cut off the new part, the grafted branch or the branch that was stuck into the ground, cut off all the new growth, and the tree is restored to its permissible state. Because you might have argued that since a person is doing such a significant act of grafting a new branch or a new plant onto a tree stump, that's now like planting a whole new tree, and therefore the whole structure would become usher, even the old stump. The chiddush is, according to Rabbi Yanai, that no, as long as you just cut off the new stuff, then everything else is okay. Omar Shmuel. Now Shmuel makes another statement. Hamishtacha ve'li'ilan tosafa or tosefta asura. Shmuel says that if you bow down to a tree that was not planted for avodah zarah, then only the stuff that grows anew becomes usher for avodah zarah. Now, who does that sound like? Who does that sound like? Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Thank you, Chaim. So, Masav Rabbi Elazar. Gida o upislo lavodas kolchavim vehechlif notul ma shehechlif. Gida o upislo in lo gida o upislo lo. So the Gemara says, now hold on a second. The Mishnah says that you actually have to do a maisa, you have to do an action to the tree itself in order for the aftergrowth to be usher. You either have to cut off a branch or cut off the trunk, and then what grows afterwards becomes avodah zarah. But merely bowing down to a tree without cutting anything off the tree, it sounds like from our Mishnah, will not render the aftergrowth avodah zarah. So if I bow down to a sapling and it grows to a tall tree, according to our Mishnah, would not make it avodah zarah. So how do you reconcile that? So Amar Lacha Shmuel Hamani Rabbanan He Shmuel Damar Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Da Amar Ilan Shanatul Basof Avdo Aser. So the Gemara says very simple. Our Mishnah goes like the Chachamim.
who say that just bowing down to a tree that was planted innocently does not render any portion of the tree, even the aftergrowth, into avodah zarah. But the Chachamim will agree that if you cut off a branch for the purpose of the aftergrowth being avodah zarah, or the trunk, so then that will render the aftergrowth avodah zarah. But I, Shmuel, am holding like Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, and I hold that when you just bow down to a tree without doing anything to the tree, the aftergrowth becomes avodah zarah. So maskef lo Ravashi mimai de Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda v'Rabbanan b'tosefes pligi, dilma tosefes l'divrei hakol aser uvi ikaro pligi. The Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda savar ikaro nami aser. So the Gemara says, perhaps you're totally misunderstanding the machlokas between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. In other words, what the Gemara is trying to do is to say that Shmuel's statement that when you bow down to a tree, you make the aftergrowth from that point onwards into avodah zarah, Shmuel is not limiting himself only according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, but even the Chachamim would agree to that. And maybe our whole understanding of the machlokas between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda was mistaken. Perhaps we have to modify our understanding that really both the Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanan would hold that when you bow down to a tree, anything that grows after that point is aser. What's the real machlokes? What about the part of the tree that had already been growing? That on that there's a machlokes. That Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says that by bowing down to a tree, I aser the whole tree, not just the aftergrowth. And the Chachamim say that by bowing down to a tree, you only aser the aftergrowth and not what was already there. And what's the argument? Rabbi Yossi would hold, Dichsiv va'asherehem tisrafun ba'esh. Rabbi Yossi looks at the pasuk that says, burn their asherah trees in the plural, completely, incinerate them completely. And so, like Rashi explains, the word asherah is written in the plural to imply two different kinds of asherah trees. One that was planted initially for that purpose, and the other that was planted innocently and only afterwards was worshipped. And the Torah says both of them have to be completely destroyed because both of them are totally aser. V'Rabbanan savri, ikar ilan shari dichsiv va'asherehem tegadeun. Ezehu ilan shegiduo asur v'ikaro shari hevi omer ilan shenetao lebasof avado. And the Chachamim say, but I have a counter pasuk that says va'asherehem tegadeun, that you only have to cut down a tree to its stump. And that implies that only the aftergrowth is aser after you worshipped it, but the part that was there before remains permissible. But wait a minute, that's not how we understood the Chachamim previously. And as a matter of fact, if you put on your memory sticks in your brain, right, really what we had said previously, how do the Chachamim understand va'asherehem tegadeun if they hold that you can't aser a tree, right? There's no such thing as a tree becoming aser midway, according to the Chachamim. So how did they understand it? Remember, they said it's telling you the protocol of sequence when you enter into Eretz Yisrael. Mm-hmm. First, when you enter into Eretz Yisrael, you're not going to have time to be lumberjacks and to take care of all of the trees. So just take an axe and quickly chop down the tree down to the stump, then conquer the enemy, and then come back and you'll uproot the tree afterwards. But there it's talking about trees that were planted for Asherah. There's no such thing as worshiping a tree after the fact, right? But now the way you're explaining it, that's not the way the Chachamim would explain it. You're saying that even according to the Chachamim, the aftergrowth is Aser. So, Eipuch Rabbanan le Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda le Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, but they're not committed to learning the psukim the way we learned it 3 days ago, right? We were just conjecturing that that's how they would learn the psukim, the way that we understood the machlokas. But maybe they're learning it the other way around. And perhaps we were mistaken originally in our understanding of the real machlokas. So what we're proposing now, which is how the Gemara is going to conclude, by the way, what we're proposing is that even the Chachamim would hold that if you bow down to a tree after it was planted innocently, only the aftergrowth will be aser. And according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, the whole tree will be aser. But then we're stuck with a question now. But if that's how we're going to maintain, imkein gida ou pislo man ketani lo rabbanan v'lo Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Because I rabbanan below gida ou pislo nami tosefes asura, I Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda ikra ilanami aser. But then we're stuck, we have a quandary. We've painted ourselves into a corner, because then who does our Mishnah go like? Our Mishnah says that the only time that the aftergrowth is aser is if you did a maisa, is if you actually cut off a branch or a trunk, which the implication being, like we just said before, that if you just worship it without doing a maisa to the tree doesn't become aser. But now you just told me that according to the Chachamim, when you bow down to a tree, even in that case, without doing a maisa, the aftergrowth is aser. So how do you explain that according to the Mishnah? And it's even worse if you wanted to say our Mishnah was like Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, because according to Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, bowing down to a tree makes the whole tree aser, not just the aftergrowth. So who does our Mishnah go like? It doesn't go like the Rabbanan or like Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. So the Gemara says, "I boy sema Rabbanan, vi boy sema Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda." The reality is, I can answer that. I can explain our Mishnah either going like the Chachamim or even going like Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, and I'll explain. I boy sema Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, ki kamer Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda below gido pislo ikar ilan aser bistama. Aval gido pislo goli adaiti dipatosefes nichalei beikar ilan lo nichalei. So I'll tell you like this. When does Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda say that the whole tree that you bow down to becomes aser? Only when you didn't do anything to reveal to the contrary. But what our Mishnah is teaching you is like this. According to Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, what if I cut off a branch and I say, the aftergrowth shall now be aser? What I've done through my action is to designate that only the aftergrowth is aser, but not the rest of the tree. And if that's the case, the chiddush of our Mishnah is that even according to Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, that when you generically bow down to a tree, the whole tree becomes aser. That's because you didn't do a maisa to indicate anything to the contrary. But here, since you cut off a branch of this or the trunk, you've shown that you only want the aftergrowth to be aser, and therefore only the aftergrowth is aser. That's how I would explain it according to Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. And iboy sema Rabbanan gida o upislo it's derichale. I could also explain that the Mishnah goes like the Chachamim. And what's the chiddush? If even bowing down makes the aftergrowth aser, so then why does the Mishnah say that only when I cut off a branch does it become aser? So salkadaita chamina kevin David le'maisa begufa ikar ilanami litzer kamash malan. The chiddush is as follows: that I might have thought that when you bow down to something without doing a maisa, only the aftergrowth is aser. But when you actually do a maisa to the tree, like cutting off a branch or a trunk, then the whole tree becomes aser. Kamash malan that not. Kamash malan that according to the Chachamim, regardless of whether you just bow down, or even if you do a significant act to the tree itself, only the aftergrowth becomes aser and not the older part of the tree. So that's the conclusion of the Gemara, that Shmuel is halacha l'maisa, that if a person were to bow down to a tree that was planted innocently, then he wouldn't be able, according to the Chachamim, he wouldn't be able to aser the existing portion of the tree, but anything that grows afterwards would become aser. Bob, do you have any questions now?
Yes. Usually I think we've been saying that whatever an idol worshiper designates as his avodah zarah, whatever it is, then we aser that. Whether
right.
And now we're sort of making an exception that if there's a tree already there and it's growing and the idol worshiper comes and designates it, there's an opinion that may not be an avodah zarah altogether.
Correct. Well, remember, the last few days what we've been saying is that there are limitations to designation. For example, if an Oved Avodah idolater comes along and designates a mountain as Avodah Zarah,
That's true.
Remember? So only things that are on top of the mountain, but not the mountain itself.
Right.
And then we said Asherah also has limitations, right? Remember? So that this falls into that category. Okay. Another example of limitations. Let's say I go over to your pair of glasses and I start worshiping your glass. I can't make your property into Avodah Zarah. So remember, there are limitations. Okay. Next, let's go on to the next Mishnah. Ezo Asherah, kol sheyesh tachtei avodas kochavim. So now the Gemara seems to ask a nonsensical question. What is an Asherah tree?
Should be the reverse order. We should have decided already what Asherah was before you started all.
Yeah, I mean, the last Mishnah just told us there are three categories.
So how do you?
So why are you asking this question? We just, it's superfluous, right? And then what is the Mishnah's answer? Any tree that has an idol underneath the tree. And Reb Shimon Omer kol she'ovdin osa. And Reb Shimon disagrees And he says, no, the tree itself has to be worshipped. But if they just put an idol underneath the tree, that's not an Asherah tree. Now, umaysa betzidan be'ilan she'yovden osam and so tachtov gal. And now the Gemara illustrates the story to show how Reb Shimon opposed the Chachamim. What was the case? They found a tree, then underneath the tree there was a pile of stones. And the question was, is this pile of stones idolatrous or not? So Amar lehen Reb Shimon bidku es agal hazeu batku matzu botzura. And they examined it, and they found some kind of image made from this pile of stones. Either it was engraved in it, or it was shaped in a certain fashion, so they surmised that it was Avodah Zarah. So now the shaila becomes, is the tree usher, or only that pile of stones usher? And Amar lahen hol v'latzura hein ovdim natir lahem es ha'ilan. And Reb Shimon says, I grant you that it's Avodah Zarah, but they don't worship the tree, they only worship the pile of stones. And therefore the tree is completely okay. Now remember, according to the previous Mishnah, you can permit such a tree even according to the Chachamim as long as you remove the statue. But here Reb Shimon is being materid even without removing the pile of stones. He's saying the tree's got nothing to do with the Avodah Zarah, and you can therefore benefit from it. So the Gemara now asks the question, Ezehu Asherah v'hanan shlosh Asherahs tonight. What kind of question are you asking? What is an Asherah tree? The previous Mishnah just enumerated that there are three kinds of Asherah. So what kind of question are you asking? So Hachi Kamar. Shtayim divrei hakol ve'echas machlokas de Reb Shimon v'Rabbanan. What our Mishnah means to say is, we gave you three cases, but we want to clarify that the first two are undisputed. The third case of Asherah of the previous Mishnah, which was if you put an idol underneath a tree, that's disputed by Reb Shimon. That's a machlokas Rabbanan and Reb Shimon. And Ezuhi Asherah shenechluk Reb Shimon v'chachamim. And what is that case? Kol sheyesh tachtei avodas kochavim. If you put a statue underneath, Reb Shimon Omer kol she'ovdin osa. And Reb Shimon disagrees, and he says that if they just put an idol underneath, then the tree is not an Asherah tree. Okay. Now the Gemara changes gears, switches gears. According to Rashi, this is a totally disconnected question, and it goes as follows. Ezohi Asherah stam. Now, I'm coming into a new town, and I don't know what trees were worshipped and what trees were not worshipped. What are the symptoms of a tree that was used for Avodah Zarah? How am I supposed to know? If I don't see any other signs, I can't find an idol, how will I know? So, basically, as you'll see, you don't have to assume that a tree is Avodah Zarah if there are no symptoms. But here's a regular symptom that was common in the times of the Gemara. Amar Rav, kol shekormim yoshvim tachtea ve'ein tomin mi peirosea. If you find priests for idolatry sitting under the tree, and whatever they're doing, but they're not eating any of the fruit, so that's a sign that this tree is an Avodah Zarah tree, and therefore it's Asr Bahana. Ushmol Amar, Afilu Amri Hanik Tamari Lebei Natsrafi Asr, Derami Beishichra Vishasi Lebei Omeda. And Shmuel says, I'll go even one step further. Even if they take the dates, but they say that the dates of the tree are going to be used for Bei Natsrafi, which is the name of Avodah Zarah, then even though they're using the dates, the tree will also be Asr because of an Asherah, because what they typically do is they designate them as holy dates, and then they save the dates and make mead or beer out of them, and they drink it only on their holy day, the holy beer for the holy day, like sacrament, right? So Amar Ameimar, Amar Li Sabi de Pumpadisa Hilchasa Kishmol. And the elders of Pumpadisa tell me that that's how we paskin like Shmuel, because we've actually seen them do that. So you see that idolatry was still prevalent in the times of Shmuel. It's really unclear to me. Shmuel lives in Pumpadisa, which is a Babylonian city. Was it under Persian rule? Was it under Roman rule? I don't know. I know that there was, this was a time of transition. If it was Roman rule, it could be early Christianity or some pagan Roman practice. It could also be under Persian rule and be some Zoroastrian practice. But whatever it is, it was idolatrous at that time.
You wonder if the Christmas trees are having that kind of origin.
Who knows? Could be. You never know. Next Mishnah. Lo yeshev b'tzila v'im yoshav tohar. You may not sit in the shade of an Asherah tree, but b'di'eved, if you did, you're not stigmatized. You don't become tamei as a result. But v'lo yavor tachteha v'im ovar tamei. But you're not allowed to pass underneath an Asherah tree, and if you do, even b'di'eved, you're going to be tamei. Now this is a rabbinic tumah. Now you're going to ask me the immediate question.
Well, yeah.
Sitting in its shade means sitting
sitting
underneath the tree. What's the difference? So this is very important to understand the next piece of Gemara. At noon, when the sun is directly overhead, there's only shadow of the tree directly underneath the tree. You can only get shade from the tree if you're sitting underneath the tree. But at 2 in the afternoon, the sun is already over here. I can sit not underneath the tree and still get some of the shade of the tree. So that's what the first part of the Mishnah is talking about, where at 2 p.m., I'm sitting adjacent to the tree, but not underneath the tree. So that is asur lechatchila, but b'di'evet I don't become tamei. But if I go underneath the tree, then b'di'evet I become tamei. Okay? Now, haisa gozeles es harabim vaver tachtei atar. But that halacha, that by going underneath the tree I become tamei, is only if it wasn't protruding into Rishus Harabim. But if a guy planted an Asherah tree and he allowed it to protrude into a public thoroughfare going over Bathurst, then if I drive underneath it, I'm not going to become tamei in that case. The Gemara will clarify that in just a moment. The Gemara now says, Lo yeshev b'tzila pshita. Isn't it obvious that you're not allowed to benefit from an Asherah tree? So what does the Mishnah even have to tell me that I can't sit in its shade? Amar Rabba bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yechon lo nitzracha ela l'tzeil tzila. The chiddush is that even if I'm sitting in the tzeil tzila, now what is the word tzeil tzila? The shadow of the shadow, or the shade of the shade. So let me just explain. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the shade of the tree is protruding beyond just underneath the tree, and it's a strong, dark shadow that it casts, right? But at 5 in the afternoon, the sun is already over here. The length of the shadow that the tree casts is longer than the height of the tree. That which is longer, the part of the shadow which goes farther than the height of the tree, is called tzeil tzila. It's a much weaker shadow, even though it goes a much further distance. It casts a giant shadow. Or as someone said in today's DAF, it's a 5 o'clock shadow, right? So in any event, that's what tzeil tzila means. Is that the chiddush of the Mishnah is that even though it's a weaker shadow and it's much further away from the tree, I'm still not allowed to lechatchila sit underneath it. So michlal de betzel kamasim yashav tamei. So are we to infer from your interpretation that if I sit underneath the regular shade at 2 in the afternoon, then I will become tamei? Lo. Dafilu l'tzel kamasa nami im yashav tar v'hakamashman dafilu l'tzel tzila lo yeshav. No, that's not what you should infer. As long as I'm not directly underneath the tree, if I sit in its shade, even the strong shade at 2 p.m., I will not become tamei. But we're telling you that lechatchila still, even in the tzeil tzila from 5 p.m., you should not sit underneath. Ika demasni la aseifa. Some learn that this whole discussion goes on the second part. V'im yashav tor, that if I sat in the shade of the tree, I don't become tamei. So the Gemara says, pshita, isn't that obvious? Why would you become tamei? So Amar Rabba bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yechon lo nitzracha ela l'tzeil kol masa. No, the chiddush is that even though you're sitting in the 2 o'clock shade, which is very strong and adjacent to the tree, you still don't become tamei. So michlal de l'tzeil tzila afilu lechatchila yeshev. So shall I infer from the way you're interpreting the Mishnah that if I sit in the 5 o'clock shadow, which is very distant, that even lechatchila that's okay? No. Lo hakamashmalan dafilu l'tzeil kamasa im yashav tohar. What it's telling me is that really lechatchila don't sit under even the 5 o'clock shadow. That's very far. But it's telling me that even though you're not allowed to sit under any part of the shadow, b'di'eved, even if you sat under the stronger 2 o'clock shadow, you still will not become tamei. But the bottom line of either way you learn the discussion is, lechatchila, never sit in the shade of the tree, whether it's 2 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and b'di'eved, whether you sat in the 2 o'clock or 5 o'clock shadow, it's still b'di'eved, you're not tamei. V'lo ya'avor tachteha v'im ovar tamei, and you're not allowed to go underneath the tree, but b'di'eved, if you do, you become tamei. My time, what's the reason? The answer is that the thing that makes you tamei is that invariably when there's an Asherah tree, there is an offering placed at the base of the tree. And tikroves, an offering for avodah zarah, the rabbis decreed that it makes you tameh. When you come into the same ohel, the same ohel, the same enclosure, that's the word, enclosure as the tikrovis. Money, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, the Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, Minayin letikrovis avodas kolchavim shematama ba'ohel, shnemar vayitzamdula va'al pa'or va'yochlu zivchei mesim. And that's what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira taught. He says, how do you know that if you're in the same enclosure of tikrovis avodah zarah, that you become tameh? It's based on a pasuk in Tehillim that says that the Jews lusted and were drawn into the Baal Peor idolatry worship, and they ate from the offerings of the dead. So why are you comparing idolatry to the dead? Ma meis metame ba'ol afti korban avodas kolchavim metame ba'ol. That just like a corpse, if you're in the enclosure of a corpse, you become tameh. So too, if you're in the enclosure of an offering for avodah zarah, rabbinically you become tameh. That's what the takana was. Next, Taisa gozelas sarabim v'aver tachteh hator. But if it's protruding into a public thoroughfare and you walk underneath it, you don't become tameh. Iboyelahu avar o over. So the question now is that only b'di'eved, but lechatchila you're not allowed to walk underneath it on Bathurst Street? Or is it even lechatchila you're allowed to walk underneath it? So Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar mishmei dechizkiya amar over, Rabbi Yochanan amar im avar. So you have a machlokes. One says only b'di'eved, and the other one says no, even lechatchila, since it's in a public thoroughfare and it's got no right to be there, I'm allowed to lechatchila walk underneath it. V'lo pligi hadiika dericha adircha achrina hadaleka dircha achrina. And the truth is, they're not arguing. The question is, what are the logistics? If there's a way for me to circumvent the tree, then lechatchila I have to do that, and I can't walk underneath it lechatchila. And only b'di'eved, if I did, I don't become tameh. But if there's no other way to circumvent it because the tree is covering the entire width of the Rishus Harabim, so then even lechatchila I'm allowed to walk underneath it. So Amalei Rav Sheshis l'shamei, kimatis lahasam arhitni. Now Rav Sheshis, this is the story, Rav Sheshis was blind, as we know from other Gemaras, and he used to travel with his, attendant. And he said, I know that we always have to walk underneath this Asherah tree. When we get there, I want you to walk with me very quickly so that we spend as little amount of time underneath it as possible. Let's really run through it. So the Gemara says, hey chidami, idaleka dircha achrina lamali arhitni mishrashari, v'ideika dircha achrina ki omar arhitni mishari. So I don't understand, says the Gemara, if there was no other way to go, then we just established that lechatchila it's permitted. Why does he have to rush? And if there is another way to go, if it's possible to circumvent the tree, then what do you accomplish by walking underneath it quickly? You're obligated to circumvent it. So, why was Rav Shesha saying this? The Gemara says, La'olam deleka dircha achrini, va'adam chashav shayni. The answer is that in that circumstance, there really was no way to circumvent the tree. They had to walk underneath it. But since Rav Shesha says, look, I'm an adam chashav, people are looking at me to set an example, and if I take my leisurely time, people will think Asherah is not a big deal. So therefore, let's do it as fast as possible so people will see that this is not a desirable situation. Next mission. Zorin tachteha yirakos biyamos hageshamim v'lo biyamos hachama, v'hachazirin lo biyamos hachama v'lo biyamos hageshamim. So the Mishnah now says, now remember, we're not allowed to benefit from an Asherah tree. So, can I plant vegetables on the soil that's underneath the shade of the Asherah tree? So the Mishnah says it's permitted to plant vegetables. Now, of course, the question is, if you're not allowed to go on to get shade from it, how are you going to harvest the vegetables? So it could be that you're planting them at a time when there's no shade, right? It's cloudy. It's cloudy outside, or it's nighttime. So that would be a way to answer it. So you're allowed to plant vegetables, but only in the winter months when there's no benefit to the vegetables growing from the shade of the tree. But in the summer months, when it's hot and sunny, there's benefit to the vegetables growing that they won't get parched from the sun, so therefore it's usher to benefit from the shade of the Asherah tree. Now, when it comes to lettuce is a much more delicate plant, And therefore, even in the winter, there's benefit from the shade of the tree, and therefore it's usher both in the winter and in the summer. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Aflo Yerakos B'Yamos Hageshamim B'Bnei Hanevia Nosheres Aleya and Vahavalahen Lezevel. And Rabbi Yossi is machmir by other vegetables as well. You can never plant vegetables, he says, like even carrots and radishes, because even though they're not benefiting in the winter from the shade, but they're benefiting from the falling leaves. The falling leaves will act as fertilizer, like a compost, to enrich the soil, and therefore it's usher also in the winter. So the Gemara now says, Lememra de Rabbi Yossi savar zeves agorim usher v'rabbanan amri zeves agorim mutter. Is this to suggest that when I have two contributing factors to the growth of something, let's say something that's one thing is permitted and one thing is prohibited. The soil is permitted, but the leaves are prohibited. It sounds like according to Rabbi Yossi, that's a problem, and according to the Chachamim, it's okay. That's what we call zeh vazeh gorem. You have two contributing factors. Rabbi Yossi says, since the leaves are contributing, it's usher. And the Chachamim say, no, the main thing is the soil. The leaves are only secondary, so therefore it's not a problem. But wait a minute. Ha'ibcha shaminan lahu, did not Rabbi Yossi omer shochek v'zor l'ruach omatu liyam, omru lo afu nasa zevel, v'nemer lo yitbak biyadcha mu'umi min acherim. Kasha the Rabbanan ad the Rabbanan, kasha the Rabbi Yossi ad the Rabbi Yossi. But we know that the opposite is true, that if anything, the Chachamim are the ones who say zev zegorim is usher, and Rabbi Yossi says zev zegorim is mutter. Where do we know this? Because previously, several days ago, we learned that according to how do you dispose of a statue of idolatry, Rabbi Yossi said, grind it up and scatter it into the wind. And the Chachamim say no, because eventually the dust will settle and it'll fertilize the soil that it's resting upon, and you can't get any benefit from idolatry. So you see, according to the Chachamim, the dust from Avodah Zarah, even though it's secondary to the soil, but it's still adding something, and therefore it's usher. Why then are the leaves okay over here, according to them? And according to Rabbi Yossi, it's okay with the dust of Avodah Zarah, but it's not okay because of the leaves. So what's the difference? They're both contradicting each other. So the Gemara says, Blish bishlam ad Rabbi Yossi ad Rabbi Yossi lo kasha, hasam de ka'aza le'ibud matir, hachad lo ka'aza le'ibud aser. So I could explain the contradiction in Rabbi Yossi. Why does Rabbi Yossi say that it's okay to scatter the dust of the statue to the wind? Because you're doing an action to demonstrate that you're trying to get rid of it. And therefore it's okay if it ends up settling and fertilizing something. But here, there's no demonstration that the leaves are undesirable because they're falling naturally on top of the vegetables. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi would be more machmir over here. However, Ela de Rabbanan and the Rabbanan kasha, but you still haven't resolved the Chachamim. Why the Chachamim so machmir by the dust of Avodah Zarah, but they're so lenient when it comes to the falling leaves? So the Gemara says, Epoch, you know what? You're right. Maybe you have to switch the opinions in our Mishnah. That really, according to the Chachamim, the falling leaves is a problem in the winter, and according to Rabbi Yossi, it's okay. But the Gemara says that's one way of looking at it. V'ibai seimo, or maybe I'll explain it differently. Lo teipoch, the Rabbi Yossi kiddushanin. Like we'll answer Rabbi Yossi like we said, that if you're demonstrating that you don't want the dust of the Avodah Zarah anymore, it's okay if it settles. And the leaves, since there's nothing that demonstrates that you don't want them, we're going to be more machmer. Now, how do you explain the Rabbanan? The Rabbanan, Keda Amar Rav Marberei de Rav Kahana, Masha Mashbiach Bo'or Pogeim B'Basar, Hachanami Masha Mashbiach B'Naveha Pogeim B'Tzel. So this, in order to understand the citation of the Gemara is talking about a case in Maseches Bechoros. If an animal that was designated as a korban develops a mum, so the halacha is that you're allowed to sell it under certain conditions, and then you can use the proceeds to purchase another animal. But the original animal, even though it has a mum, retains a certain aspect of respect that you have to show it. You can't treat it in a disrespectful way, even though now it's totally chul and it's totally non-holy. So an example of that is that, let's say you want to slaughter the animal, and instead of using it for its meat, you want to use it for its hide. Now, what's the big deal? When you remove the hide off of an animal where primarily your objective is the hide, there's a method where you start flaying the hide from the hooves, and you dismember it in such a way such that you keep the hide as intact as possible. But part of that chachma involves wasting a certain percentage of the meat. So when you want to maximize the meat yield, you the hide is cut up in a number of places. But when you want to keep the hide intact, you end up having to sacrifice a certain percentage of the meat. And so the Chachamim over there say that you're really not supposed to do that when the animal had been previously designated as a korban, because it's a bizayon, it's a disgrace that you're discarding so much meat of the korban. The objection is raised over there, but wait a minute, aren't you shortchanging the Beis Hamikdash? If after all the proceeds of this animal that are going to be sold are going to go to the temple, if a guy says, I want to buy it for its hide because it's got a beautiful hide, and I'll give a much higher price because I can use the hide for the temple, if you're telling him that he can't remove it that way, so aren't you giving less to the temple? So how did Rav Mari answer the question? Rav Mari said, it's not a problem because it's an offset. In other words, you'll get more money for the hide, but you're going to get less money because there's less of a meat yield. So it's basically a wash. And that's the reason why. In the same way, what we're suggesting over here is like this. The Chachamim are makel over here by the leaves, because even though the leaves act as compost for the plant, but the shade in the winter is actually bad for the vegetables, so it's a wash. There may be some added benefit from the leaves, but that will be offset by the disadvantage to the growing vegetables by being underneath the shade of a tree. And that's why the Chachamim are prepared to say that it's okay over here. Next, the Gemara now says, V'savar Reb Yossi zev gorim aser. How can you, but still, I have a problem. You're telling me that according to Reb Yossi, the leaves of the falling Asherah tree, because they contribute to the growth of the vegetables, it now becomes a problem? Since when does Rabbi Yossi hold Zeves Agorim as Aser? Because there's a Mishnah that says, Vatznan Rabbi Yossi Omer, Notnin Yechur Shal Arla ve'ein Notnin Ego Shal Arla mipnei shehu Peri. That Rabbi Yossi says that even though you're allowed to take a branch from an orla tree and plant it in the ground, you're not allowed to take the nut growing from an orla tree and plant it in the ground, because the produce of an orla tree is Aser Bahana. And if you plant it in the ground, you're getting hana from the aser nut to grow a tree. But v'amar Rav Yehuda Amarav moder Reb Yossi she'im nata v'hivrich v'hirkiv mutter. That's only lechatchila you cannot plant the nut. But Reb Yossi acknowledges that if b'di'evid you did plant the nut, the tree that grows from it is mutter. Why is that? Zev zegoring. It's true that the nut has contributed to the growth of the tree, but the soil and the nutrients in the soil also contribute. So when you have two contributing factors, one is aser and one is mutter, it sounds like according to Rabbi Yossi, it's not a problem, it's okay. And then V'tanya Nami Hachi Moder Rabbi Yossi Shimnata V'hirvich V'hirkiv mutter. That's the Brisa. The Brisa says that explicitly, that as long as there's another contributing factor, the whole thing is okay. V'chitei mashani leila Rabbi Yossi ben shari sirm la'avodas kol chavim umi shani le. And maybe you'll say that Rabbi Yossi is more machmir by avodah zarah, that zev zagorim is aser, but I'm going to prove to you that that's not the case. And we'll discuss that proof tomorrow, but we're basically stuck at a question here that our Mishnah seems to be saying zev zagorim according to Rabbi Yossi is aser, but we know from other halachos that according to Rabbi Yossi, zev zagorim is mutter. Have a great day, everyone.